and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Xu Qinduo. At the most important event on the Chinese political calendar this year, the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China will soon convene in Beijing. So what can we expect? How will the once-in-a-5-year meeting set the tone for China's development for the next 5 years? And how will the world's second-largest economy navigate through the economic, geopolitical, and environmental challenges facing the world today? To find out more, I'm joined today by British scholar Martin Jacques, author of When China Rules the World, The End of the Western World and the Birth of a New Global Order. Martin, welcome. Let's first take a look at the most important, upcoming event in China that everyone is talking about, the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, soon to be held at the Great Hall of the People here in Beijing. Why is this meeting so important?
Well, of course, it's 5 years since the last Congress, and a lot has happened since the last Congress. That took place very soon after the beginnings of the shift in America with the election of Trump. So we already could see relations deteriorating. But of course, since then, they've deteriorated a lot more. The global economic situation has become a lot more difficult, a lot more serious, a much lower growth rate. And of course, centrally as well for the world has been the impact of COVID-19. So this Congress will be responding to all of these developments which have changed the situation, not just nationally, but also internationally in very important ways. And it'll be very interesting, I think, to see how the Congress responds to this new situation.
Well, as you said, many probably do agree with you that the meeting will be one of the most consequential gatherings of the party members in decades. So what kind of a policy shift do you expect to see? How do you think the meeting will shape Chinese policy and the future of the country?
Well, I suppose the best way of looking at it is what are the problems that China faces now, both nationally and internationally. And there's quite a few issues we could discuss, but just let me raise three in this context. First of all, not necessarily in order of importance. First of all, clearly one of the worrying things is the slowdown in the economic growth rate and the difficulties that China's having in this context. And this is obviously very different from the position that, defined most of the reform period from 1978 to 2016. And I think that, so one of the questions will be, how can China achieve 5-6%, the target growth rate which the party has set itself, because it's going to struggle, I think, to achieve that growth rate this year. Secondly, COVID-19, which China handled brilliantly, in my view, but we're in a new phase of it now, and I know there's a lot of discussion in China about the zero COVID approach, and the cost of the zero COVID approach. And so far, the position of the party has remained a zero approach, and I think that there's a lot to commend that. But of course, the cost is very, very great economically. I don't expect the Congress to suddenly say something about this, which is different from what it said the party's been saying. But it'll be interesting to see what the party exactly does say, and also what is likely to follow in the coming period. And I think that the third problem the party Congress faces is the international situation, which I think is extremely serious. It's not obviously the centerpiece is the deterioration in the relationship between China and the United States since 2016. That's been an absolutely line of continuity. Biden has more or less continued Trump's policy. Now, the gravity of the situation is not just in that immediate context, it's also the growing instability in the world. The fact that now it's very difficult to predict what is going to happen. There's a deep uncertainty, a deep unpredictability about the situation. And everywhere not quite everywhere you look, but this is now, I would say, the general characteristic of the global situation. And I think, and it's disturbing because for the party, it's very difficult. For China, it's very difficult situation to know exactly how to handle and so on when you're dealing with this kind of unpredictability. I mean, a classic example is obviously the Russia situation, which was really, it seems to me, a surprise for virtually everyone, perhaps apart from Putin and Russia. So I think those are some of the key issues that the Congress will be responding to, will find ways of dealing with, and will be setting out a way of handling in the coming period.
Well, these are indeed challenges, facing China. But based on your understanding of the Party of China, the Communist Party, how do you expect the party leadership, to address these challenges at home and abroad?
Well, I think that it's very difficult to see in the present context and what we've seen recently how the party can find a way of improving the relationship with the United States. Obviously, if the relationship was better, the situation, I think, in various ways would look much better. But frankly, I don't see that happening. I don't see the Americans shifting on their present position, not just in the next year or two, but actually much longer than that. I think we're in this kind of, well, how should we describe it, cold freeze situation for a long time. When you go through these historical changes, they're not short-lived normally. They last a long time. Look at the Cold War, for example, previously. I don't think this is the same, but it's got obviously some of the same characteristics. So I think that this is going to be, I think the party will be thinking about how this situation might be improved, whether there could be new kind of understandings, etc. But I think basically the party's view in this situation is going to be, this is going to continue. We've got to operate with this as a reality for quite a period to come, and therefore it's reaching very, very limited understandings, and at the same time how to handle the other parts of the other parts of China's international relations, which, I mean, America is very important, but so are a lot of countries. The relationship with developing world, the relationships in East Asia, the relationships with Europe, and so on. And I think that there are challenges, and probably there are opportunities in these areas for perhaps moving the dial a bit, and in some cases rather more.
We're part of the China-U.S. relationship is tech competition from the U.S. in particular. After the U.S. President Joe Biden signed this Chips and Science Action into law, how do you make of the state of the tech risk between the two countries?
Both America and China regard technological innovation in all sorts of areas, but most notably something like semiconductors, as central to their competition. And whichever country manages to get the upper hand in this context will have a very important advantage. And I think that is the position in relationship to tech, the tech question. I mean, one, it's not clear to me at the moment. It's very difficult to know, which country has the advantage. I think that probably both have the advantage in various fields. So China has an advantage in certain areas, and it's fighting very hard to deal with the disadvantage it has in semiconductors. And in other areas, in some areas, some areas America's got the advantage. In other areas, I think China's got the advantage. I think probably in artificial intelligence, China has may well have the advantage. The next question, really, isn't it? Is if I can move on slightly, and that is strategically, what is going to happen? Well, my view is that America will not succeed in preventing China's tech development, technological progress. I don't think these kind of things work generally. They might work in one or two areas. They might slow things down. Yes, that to the disadvantage of China. But basically, I think the dynamic of China, if you look at the last 10 years or longer, China has moved so far, so quickly in so many technological areas. The idea that America somehow is going to stop that progress, I don't think that's I don't think that's a goer.
Mm-hmm. Well, Martin, right after the Chinese CPC National Congress, there will be the U.S. midterm election. So people are looking at the next 2 years of President Biden, in particular their China policy. How do you see these two important events, affecting probably the relationship between the two countries?
Well, I think that let's deal with the midterms in America first. I think that it really does depend on the result of these elections. So, and I think that it's still, I think it's still pretty uncertain, actually, what the consequences of it are going to be. One thing is clear, though, and that is that the Republican Party has become more and more Trumpian, more and more influenced by Trump. So it would probably be an exaggeration to say that Trump has the Republican Party in his pocket, but not too much of an exaggeration. So it's very difficult. But we also have to emphasize here the consensual nature of the relationship in the American political scene, in its attitude towards China. I mean, Biden has really been, on the same page as Trump. There's very little difference between them in their attitude towards China. So the impact of the midterms won't, in my view, strongly affect the policy towards China in the near future. It will have some effect. I mean, if we had Trump back again, for example, in 2024, that would certainly make a difference in all sorts of ways. But exactly, and I think he's, firm. He started the anti-China tirade, so I'm sure he'll want to continue it. But whether it's going to make that much difference, given our experience of the last 2 years of Biden, no, I don't think so. How the Congress, how the party Congress will affect the relationship? I think that if the tone of the Congress, which I don't expect it to be, but if the tone of the Congress was very strongly anti-American or something like that, I don't expect this to happen, then that would obviously affect the relationship. It really depends on what the tone and what maybe any initiatives and the sort of mood that comes out of the Congress, how that will affect the situation. But at the moment, I think it's difficult to see it making a big difference for the immediate future.
For the immediate term. Let's have a break. We will continue our discussion right after this. What's the next step for the Truss government?
I don't take the growth plan seriously. What I do take seriously is the failure of the West in general to be able to address slow growth.
Do you think the European Union, member nations in particular, are they ready for this winter in terms of energy supply?
It's a kind of existential crisis of Europe's position in the world, because each country in the European Union is in a different position, at different degrees of dependency.
Martin, let's shift to the European continent. Before that, the UK, for example, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, introduced a tax cuts plan, and then we see the strong negative response in the market, with the pound reaching the unprecedented low versus the US. So how do you make of her plan, and also what's the impact on her government as well as the nation?
Well, I think the British situation is actually very interesting. And it's very interesting because what has been happening since 2016 and the Brexit vote is two trends within the Conservative Party. First of all, growing volatility, disunity, and instability. And secondly, a growing shift to the right within the Conservative Party. So that now, to be frank with you, the Conservative Party has really seriously damaged its reputation amongst the public. I mean, damaged is probably too weak a word. Trashed its relationship. I mean, the latest opinion polls put the Conservatives well over 30% behind Labour. It's very, very difficult to come back from that situation. And I think that what the Conservatives, and this latest, the Truss government, before Truss we had Johnson, before Johnson we had May, before May we had Cameron, who obviously represented something rather different, a more centrist position. And now we're with Truss, and Truss has this very right-wing position, but also, it seems to me, displayed enormous incompetence in its handling of what is a serious situation. I mean, it's as if the decision to make these tax cuts and come out with an unfunded budget for future expenditure and so on, in a situation where Britain is basically weak. I mean, its balance of payments is weak. We are borrowing a lot of money now, in addition, because of the energy situation, because it was deemed correctly, actually, because it was a consensual view in the country, that it was impossible to expect people to pay these kind of increases. So therefore, we would have to find a way of subsidizing it. We don't have the money to subsidize it out of the budget. So therefore, it's subsidized by borrowing. Then to have these tax cuts at the same time, I mean, it completely and utterly panicked the financial markets. And then Britain pays a very heavy price for this in terms of the rise of interest rates and so on. So, and a loss of trust, deep loss of trust on the part of the financial markets in Britain's situation. So I think that we're in a very unstable situation politically, very, very unstable situation. And the question being asked, I mean, not just on the left, equally on the right, more on the right, if anything, is can trust last? Or are we going to see another change of government, or another change of prime minister in the relatively near future? I mean, the questions are being asked: can she last to Christmas?
Well, so what's next for her growth plan? She sold the plan as the plan to grow for the economy and also to create the jobs. Now, after this frustration, serious frustration, what's the next step for the Truss government?
Well, frankly, I don't take the growth plan seriously. I mean, the argument they use is, the orthodoxy has been slow growth, or even against growth, and we're going to make a break with that. Well, I don't think previous governments have been against growth. They just haven't been able to implement or conceive of a strategy which, since 2008 financial crisis, has enabled Britain to grow, except at a very, very low level, like something like 1% a year, which is chronic. But the Truss government strategy isn't going to change the situation. I mean, the reasons for the slow growth in Britain are bound up with the financial crisis, but also deeper problems within the British economy, which will require very radical changes, far more radical than she is talking about. I mean, the intellectual content of the growth strategy of the Truss government is basically vacuous. It is, all previous governments have been against growth. We're for it, so it'll happen. I mean, it doesn't really have any more gravitas. It doesn't have any gravitas at all, in fact. I mean, it's really empty. And so I don't expect it to succeed. Now, in the shorter run, 2 years, I suppose for a period, you can get growth in those circumstances, but by doing various things. But it doesn't last. There'll be no solidity to it. It'll be a short-lived phenomenon which will rapidly disappear. So I don't take the growth position seriously. What I do take seriously is the failure of the West in general to be able to address slow growth, not just Britain. I mean, Italy, France has been doing badly. Germany is now in difficulties. American growth rate, by and large over time has been slow. So this has been a general trend, not just since 2008. Actually, it goes back further than that. And one of the reasons why the West has been doing badly vis-a-vis China and other countries, other developing countries, and so on, is just relatively speaking, the economies are slow growth or relatively stagnant.
Mm-hmm. Well, speak of other Western countries here, for example, European continents. One of the challenges is the energy shortage, even food crisis. As we enter October, temperatures are dropping across Europe. So as energy supplies in the wake of the Russia's cut off of gas exports to European countries, putting European Union under great pressure. Do you think the European Union member nations in particular, are they ready for this winter in terms of energy supply?
The biggest casualty of the Ukraine war is Europe. America, and the reason is because Europe, in varying degrees, has been highly dependent on Russian oil and gas supplies. Now, some countries like Britain are not dependent on Russian oil, but they're affected, and not so much on Russian gas actually, but they are affected by the rising prices. So Britain has a problem. Germany, of course, has got the most chronic problem of all because it was very dependent and has been very dependent on Russian gas. So I think the situation varies, but in general, because of the big increase in gas prices, Europe is very damaged and will be very damaged in this winter when it's cold, you use a lot more gas and oil. And so Europe is undoubtedly the biggest casualty. I mean, I think, we've got to put this into historical context as well. If you look at the figures for Europe's share of global GDP over the last 20 years, I mean, it's been going down and down and down. I mean, Europe is now can no longer be classed as a great power. I mean, it's now really a middle a middle power because of this decline. And this energy crisis is going to is going to worsen and accelerate, I think, Europe's problems. So Europe actually faces a much bigger crisis, I think, than people have really said. It's a kind of existential crisis of Europe's position in the world. The United States has been in decline as well, relatively speaking, but not as quickly as Europe. Mm-hmm. And so this is putting a lot of strains on Europe. And I think that the energy crisis this winter will put further pressures on the situation, because each country in the European Union is in a different position, at different degrees of dependency.
Yeah, speak of that, differences over there. For example, despite this emphasis on the unity of the EU, you do see there are different voices. For example, some of the European countries are fuming about Germany's heavy spending on energy subsidies, and there's a lack of agreement on the price cap of imported Russian oil. What about the European unity, looking forward for the, in terms of their dealing with the Ukraine challenges here?
Yeah, well, I think that it's bound to place, as you say, much greater pressure on European unity. And when a country is under severe pressure, the likelihood is, or the danger is, from a broader point of view, that it will choose its own way. It will break with other countries, break with unity in the EU, and seek. I mean, what will happen with the new Italian government, for example? Well, the Italian government, which has been very dependent on Russia, and where the new right-wing government has had, it's a bit slightly tricky, but has had a friendlier attitude towards Putin and so on. So that's a good example. And how's Germany, which is under the biggest pressure of all, how's this going to handle the situation? So I think it'd be very difficult to maintain the unity around the energy question. But more generally, of course, it affects the Western alliance with regard to the war with Russia. Now, yes. One would have to say that what has been very clear is the degree to which Europe has been pro-Ukraine and anti-Russia in this war. There's no question about that. It's across Europe, and not just a particular, the right or the left or whatever. It's been pretty consensual situation. Now, it's perfectly possible, I think, difficult to say what the odds are, but it's possible that as the energy situation bites over the course of the winter, that unity might fray, because it becomes increasingly unpopular. I mean, at a popular level, that's really the issue, is what, to what extent people put up with the situation or demand some kind of shift, and countries start to seek some kind of modus vivendi in Russia, with Russia. I don't know. I think at the moment there is not much sign of that, but it could be that will happen.
Yes. Well, with that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to Mr. Jacques. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Xu Qinduo. See you next time.